Ladies and gentlemen, welcome to Metropolis Radio. Today, we are asking the question, are studios relying too much on nostalgia? But before we go any further, guys, just remember that at least one of my videos every week will not be coming to the YouTube channel. It will only be going to my BitChute, Odyssey, and Rumble channels. So if you're watching this on YouTube and you have not started following me on at least one of those three alternative sites, the links to those are down below in the description. Anyway, guys, let's get into this article from Game Rant. Are studios relying too much on nostalgia? With movie theaters back, many can expect to see their favorite characters back up on the screen, but with fewer original titles than there should be. With movie theaters finally getting back to normal amidst the pandemic, movies are coming back in a big way with titles like Spider-Man No Way Home, Ghostbusters Afterlife, and the new Scream sequel. But a majority of what options viewers will see on the big screen are predominantly sequels, prequels, and franchise titles with a lack of original movies topping the box office. With the summer blockbuster season ahead with franchises like Jurassic World, Top Gun, and Lightyear, it looks to be another summer filled with nostalgia picks and world-shaking action flicks. So the question that is floating around film circles now is whether or not studios are relying too much on the nostalgia factor to get people back to the cinema. This past week's domestic box office results shows that 3 of the top 5 grossing films have been a sequel or part of a larger franchise, with those films being Jackass Forever, Spider-Man No Way Home, and Death on the Nile, which took first place at the box office this weekend. If one were to look at the rest of the US box office, they would see even more franchise titles and sequels with Scream, Sing 2, and The Kingsman, making most major theaters like Marcus Theaters and AMC having around half of all the movies playing at a time, either a sequel, prequel, or part of a franchise. For many, this does not come as a shock, as it's not uncommon to see major studio releases that are already linked to other media reign supreme at the box office, both domestic and internationally. These are the movies that draw mass audiences into theaters, with 8 of the top 10 grossing films of all time being linked to other media, the 2 original films being James Cameron's Titanic and Avatar, and that is unadjusted for inflation. I believe adjusted for inflation, Gone with the Wind still is like the highest grossing movie of all time, at least here in North America. The last time an original movie was #1 in the box office was in early December with Disney's Encanto, December 2021. But with it being a Disney film, it's almost a given that it would become a major hit for the box office, as most Disney studio films reach #1 at the domestic box office at least 1 week of its lifespan. But actually, let me look this up real quick. I know you guys can't see my screen, but I do remember Encanto came to like Disney Plus like within a month of it hitting theaters, because Disney wanted it up on their service just in time for like Christmas Eve. So, let's look this up real quick. Box office. Okay, it did gross around $250 million worldwide, but here in North America, it was only $95,117,051. But how much of that was attributed to the fact that, well, people are just going to hold out for the Disney Plus release, because the Disney Plus release was going to come on Christmas Eve. So it's like, well, okay, we only have to wait like a month. So, fuck it. We'll just wait a month and save a shit ton of money. Just pay, the $8 a month that we already pay for Disney Plus, and the whole family can watch the movie then. Where was I before I tangented on Encanto? Okay, here we go. There's only a handful of movies that top the box office while also being wholly original, with some being huge successes like Christopher Nolan's Inception and James Cameron's record-breaking Avatar, which will be getting a few sequels of its own, now making it a franchise. And they never bring this up, but Avatar was basically Dances with Wolves meets Fern Gully. And if you don't believe me, even James Cameron himself called Avatar at one point Dances with Wolves in Space. So, Avatar is not really the most original movie on the planet. So putting Avatar in here as an example of, a wholly original movie, being a huge success is not a good example. It's becoming rare that original movies become hits, especially while showing alongside with other titles being sequels or based on beloved material from other mediums. It is difficult to compete with movies that for some have been years in the making and have audiences clamoring for it. With there seeming to be a trend of filling the box office with already used titles, audiences could start seeing a downward trend on new and original movies and creators, as studios don't want to take the gamble. Why would they when they know that just making a sequel to something that already made money is almost guaranteed to make money once again? not entirely. Have you ever heard of an economic principle called the Law of Diminishing Returns? It's pretty self-explanatory that, like, the longer a movie series goes on, we're going to apply the Law of Diminishing Returns to movies. The longer a movie series goes on, the less and less money it's going to make over time. In fact, if you look at the original Star Wars trilogy, I know this is going to be pretty bad because I don't know if I can actually pull up the box office numbers at the time. Hopefully I can. Yeah, see, I don't know if that's the box office. I don't know if that's the box office at the time. Okay, let me actually look this up because it's gotten re-released several times. But anyway, my point is, if I can't actually find these numbers, and I'm not going to waste your guys' time, but even with the original Star Wars trilogy, the original Star Wars movie made a shit ton of money. Then The Empire Strikes Back came out, and it actually made less money than the first movie. And then Return of the Jedi made less than Empire Strikes Back and the first movie. And everybody heralds the original trilogy as the best Star Wars trilogy ever. But if you look at the box office returns between each movie, it gets less and less in between each sequel. So in theory, a sequel is almost guaranteed to make money. But in reality, not as cut and dry. It is actually the newer studios like A24 where viewers will see much more original movies like Barry Jenkins' 2016 Best Picture winner Moonlight and Ari Aster's 2018 horror film Hereditary. And I've heard from a lot of people that Hereditary was not that great of a horror movie. I've refused to watch it because, like I said, I heard it wasn't that great. With all of this said, franchise and nostalgia titles do have an important place in the box office. Without many of these titles, the box office would most likely still be struggling from the effects of the COVID-19 pandemic. But with the likes of Dune and Spider-Man No Way Home having viewers swinging back into theaters, many were able to save the local cinema from closing permanently. It was the larger franchise movies that cinemas had to rely on to keep their heads above the dark waters, and viewers used to escape the reality of what came from the pandemic. But before theaters opened back up, the question of what would bring people back in amid fears of going back to what seemed not so normal anymore. The answer became Christopher Nolan's original movie, Tenet. Granted, Tenet didn't necessarily hit the mark in terms of expected box office numbers. No, it straight up freaking bombed. But wanting to see something from an original creator that people hadn't seen before is what brought cinemas back. If it was Spider-Man webbing people back into cinemas, could the box office have seen higher numbers? Possibly, but the excitement of seeing something big while also being fresh had viewers ready to return to cinemas. And many people actually credit Tenet, Christopher Nolan's Tenet bombing in the box office for Warner Brothers' decision to move their entire 2021 film slate to HBO Max. But anyway, guys, that's pretty much the end of this article. And they never even answered their own freaking question. Our studio's relying too much on nostalgia, so I'll answer their fucking question for them. Yes, they absolutely fucking are, even pre-pandemic. I think George Lucas brought this up during an interview he did with Charlie Rose, I think back in 2014, where he said something to the effect of, if it doesn't have a potential for a sequel, a franchise, or a TV show, that they don't want to touch it. And this was back in 2014. And I did bring up earlier about the Law of Diminishing Returns. Well, here's the problem. If nothing new is being made, what are they going to remake and reboot 20 years from now? What are people going to be nostalgic from the 2010s? The Total Recall reboot from 2012, the RoboCop reboot, Mad Max Fury Road, which I actually find pretty funny. Nobody's talking about that movie anymore, even though it was, the most talked about movie of 2015 for other reasons. The Star Wars sequel trilogy is not even in the cards for discussion. There's probably some okay, I'll give you a prime example. Maybe John Wick will be very nostalgic 20 years from now. I can't think of much else from the 2010s that people are going to be really nostalgic for, 10, 15 years from now. So, nostalgia has a very, very short shelf life. And the longer you play in the nostalgia, the more the effect wears off. And look at the Star Wars sequel trilogy as a prime example. Star Wars Episode 7 made over $2 billion. And then The Last Jedi, hold on, I'm actually going to look this up. I just want to make sure that I'm getting my numbers right. The Last Jedi. For the box office. I want to make sure I'm getting these numbers. Yeah, 1.3 billion dollars is what The Last Jedi made. So you went from Force Awakens made over $2 billion in theaters down to 1.3 in just one sequel. And then you have Rise of Skywalker. Now, I know that did make some money, and it made more than expected. Rise of Skywalker, here we go. If the page will load, here we go. Made $1.074 billion, and many people were actually assuming that Rise of Skywalker was going to make less money, basically because of how much The Last Jedi sucked, but good word of mouth on Rise of Skywalker did definitely help it. But still, what was like the number one complaint about the sequel trilogy? It went from Episode 7, which was nothing but a nostalgia trip, to Episode 8, which was anti-nostalgia to a degree, and then you had Rise of Skywalker that overloaded on nostalgia to make up for Episode 8's anti-nostalgia. So basically, I'm gonna go ahead and end it right here with this. You know, that with the fact that nostalgia has a very, very short shelf life. And, you know, the old saying is, you know, at some point you got to pay the piper. It's just a matter of when is the bill going to come due. And I think the bill is going to come due within the next few years. That's just my personal opinion. I could be totally wrong. But anyway, guys, I'm going to go ahead and end it right here because I know I dragged this out probably longer than it needed to be. So if you stuck around this long, thanks so much for doing so. And if you've been following me long enough, you know I'm terrible at ending these videos. So I will just see you guys on next time.